Hello, in this video I will demonstrate how to compute the variance and standard deviation for group data. So we're given a table with group data. Step one is we have to add 3 columns to the table. We need to find the midpoints, frequency times midpoints, frequency times midpoint squared. To find the midpoints, the first step is we have to add the 2 endpoints of the class limits. So we add 10 plus 34 and then divide by 2. That's going to give us 22. We could repeat that process. However, we know that the difference between each of these classes, which is called the class width, is 25. So we can use Excel to help us add 25 automatically to each value to help us generate the midpoints. So we click on the cell that contains the first midpoint and then type plus 25. And of course we always have to type an equal sign. That informs Excel that we're building a specialized function. We hit enter, we get 47. And then if we just if we use this button here on the lower right hand side, we can drag this down and Excel will automatically add 25 to the previous value, thus generating all the midpoints. Next, we have to compute each frequency times a midpoint. So we type equals, click on the first frequency cell times the cell that contains the first midpoint, and we get 110. And then once again, we can either drag or we can double click and all the other midpoints are automatically computed. Finally, for this last column, it's the frequency times midpoint squared. So keep in mind the frequency is not squared, only the midpoints are. So an easy way of calculating this column would be to multiply this midpoint with frequency times midpoint. That would leave us with the frequency times the midpoint squared. So let's do that. So we type equals, click on the first midpoint, times, click on the first value of the product, f times the midpoint, hit enter, and then just double click to get all the other values. So if we notice, this is our formula. This is called the shortcut formula for computing the variance for group data. Keep in mind that n is the sum of the frequencies. So let's find the sum of the frequencies. That's n, 37. This notation here is the sum of this last column. This notation is the sum of the column that precedes it. So let's select both of these columns and use the auto sum feature to find the sums of those values. Now we're ready to compute the variance. So to calculate the variance, let's click on an empty cell. We're going to have to build this function. I type equals. I'll use the parentheses for the numerator. I'm going to click on 37, that's our n, and then times the sum of this last column, so let's click on that value, minus the sum of this column, and that's going to be squared. So to type a square, you use this caret symbol and a 2. That's going to be that value squared. Okay, next, what I want to do is I want to add an extra parentheses just to kind of clean this up a bit. So, and then we're going to close this parentheses. That's the numerator. Then that's divided by, we're going to create some new parentheses. And you could click on 37. I'm just going to type in 37. And then the asterisk means times. 37 times 37 minus 1. Just type 36. Close that parentheses. And then close the overall parentheses. And we end up with the variance. 768.5811. Let's round that to the tenths. So 786.6. Now to compute the standard deviation, let me just correct the misspelling here. To compute the standard deviation, if you notice, we just have to compute the square root of the variance. Well, Excel does have a built-in square root function. You type equals SQRT. That's the square root function. Click on the cell 786.6 and then close the parentheses. And we have the standard deviation. So the variance and standard deviation are computed. And thank you for watching this video.